A blizzard, a lonely rancher, and 8 fragile puppies, abandoned in the storm. 1 year later, their bond defies time and nature. A story of love, loyalty, and redemption unfolds. The bitter cold of the Wyoming winter seemed to stretch forever, with snowflakes that never ceased their descent. Jack, a solitary rancher in the vast open fields, had grown accustomed to the silence that enveloped his life. The ranch was a lonely place. No neighbors for miles, no family to visit, just him, his chores, and the relentless snow that buried the world outside. His only company were the few cows he cared for, and the occasional wild deer that wandered near the edge of the forest. It was a life of hard work and complete solitude, one he had come to accept, but never truly embraced. One evening, as Jack trudged through the thickening snow, something caught his ear. A faint whimper, almost drowned out by the roaring wind. At first, he brushed it off as the wind's cruel deception. But the sound persisted, like a quiet plea, urging him to investigate. His heart raced. Instinct overtook him, pushing him to search. Through the swirling blizzard, he followed the sound, and what he discovered would shatter his world. There, in the snowdrift, lay the frozen body of a mother dog, her posture protective even in death, sheltering her 8 tiny, shivering puppies beneath her. Jack's heart shattered, the weight of the tragic scene pressing on his chest as the storm continued its unyielding assault. The sight of the lifeless mother dog haunted Jack's thoughts as he scooped up the trembling puppies one by one. They were so fragile, their small bodies barely holding on to life. His breath came in ragged gasps, and his hands shook as he clutched the tiny creatures to his chest. The storm howled relentlessly, pushing Jack to a breaking point. He could turn back, head to his cabin, and let nature take its course. But something deep inside him refused to let go. His mind screamed that they were too far gone, too weak to survive. But his heart, aching and full of an unfamiliar ache, would not abandon them. "They need me," a soft voice whispered in his mind, and before he could question his own resolve, Jack made his decision. "I'll take care of you," he whispered into the cold, as if making a promise to the mother dog who had given everything for her babies. There was no time to waste. With the puppies cradled in his arms, Jack rushed back to the warmth of his cabin. His steps faltered with every gust of wind, but he kept moving, the weight of their tiny lives heavy in his arms. Inside, he laid them gently on the floor, wrapping each one in a blanket. The fire crackled, its warmth offering a fragile reprieve from the storm. Jack worked quickly, heating milk over the stove, his hands moving instinctively as he began to feed them, drop by drop. The puppies struggled, their frail bodies shuddering with each sip. But Jack refused to let them give up. He stayed with them all night, keeping them warm, his heart swelling with each tiny breath they took. Slowly, ever so slowly, the pups began to show signs of life. Wobbly paws, little squeaks, and the faintest movements in their eyes. A bond began to form, silent but undeniable. Jack had made a promise, and now he couldn't imagine leaving them. They weren't just puppies anymore. They were his responsibility, his family. Caring for the puppies was a journey fraught with challenges, and Jack was often left feeling like he was walking a razor-thin line between life and death. Each day, he found himself waking before dawn, his body stiff from the cold, but his heart heavy with determination. His hands, once only accustomed to tending to cattle and farm chores, now delicately cradled fragile tiny bodies. Every morning, he'd light a fire in the stove and prepare a fresh batch of warm milk, his eyes scanning the small group of puppies who had come to depend on him in ways he never expected. The puppies were growing, slowly but steadily, but every day was a battle. They were still so small, their bones fragile, their little bodies barely able to keep up with the intense demands of survival in the harsh winter. Jack spent his days feeding them, making sure each one had enough to eat, warming their blankets, and doing his best to provide them with comfort in a world that had shown them none. At times, the exhaustion weighed heavily on him, and he found himself staring at the fire late into the night, wondering if he was doing enough. He fed them every few hours, like clockwork, no matter the weather outside, no matter how tired he felt. His hands trembled as he brought each puppy to his chest, one by one, their tiny mouths sucking greedily at the milk he offered them. The smallest ones often struggled to drink, but Jack held them gently, coaxing them with a soft, steady voice. He couldn't give up on them, not now, not after all they had been through. Days turned into weeks, and the puppies grew stronger. Each one began to show signs of their unique personalities, and Jack found himself marveling at the differences between them. There was Max, the adventurous one, always trying to break free of his pen and explore the cabin. He was bold, curious, and endlessly energetic, always pushing the limits of what Jack thought was possible. And then there was Bella, the quiet one, her coat a soft, silvery white, and her gentle, almost regal demeanor. She was calm and affectionate, content to sit at Jack's feet, always watching the others with a quiet intelligence in her eyes. But it was Luna, the smallest of the group, who captured Jack's heart in ways he hadn't expected. She was small, frail when she first arrived, and yet there was something undeniably fierce about her spirit. Luna was always the last to give up during feeding time, her small, persistent paws nudging her siblings aside in her determination to get what she needed. And as the days passed, she became stronger. She was the first to crawl to Jack's side, to lick his hand as if to thank him. Her tiny tail wagged fiercely whenever she caught sight of him, and Jack couldn't help but smile as he saw the fire in her eyes. Jack began to view Luna as a symbol of resilience. In the moments when the house was quiet and the fire crackled low, Jack would look at her and feel a warmth he hadn't known before. She had become a mirror of what he had lost. The connection he had with the mother dog, the promise he had made, but also the promise of something new. Luna was a symbol of his own healing, a beacon of hope that bloomed in the unlikeliest of places. As the weeks passed, Jack's attachment to the puppies deepened. They were no longer just survivors of a storm, they were his family. He couldn't remember a time when his life had been so full of warmth, love, and the sound of tiny paws padding across the wooden floors. Every wag of a tail, every bark that echoed in the cabin was a reminder that he had done the right thing. He had saved them, and in return, they had saved him. Yet, the loss of the mother dog never truly left him. There were nights when Jack would stand at the window, staring out at the blizzard that still raged beyond his cabin. He thought of her body frozen in the snow, her sacrifice, and the pain would stir deep within him. But as he looked down at Luna and her siblings, a bittersweet understanding grew inside him. The pain of loss would never completely fade, but it was softened by the love and loyalty the puppies had brought into his life. Jack realized that in saving them, he had found the family he never thought he would have, one he had been unknowingly searching for all along. And in that quiet bond, forged in the midst of a storm, Jack began to understand what it meant to heal. The quiet, isolated life that Jack had grown used to began to feel suffocating. The snowstorms had not relented. If anything, they were becoming harsher, more frequent. Each day, Jack worked tirelessly to maintain his ranch, feeding the cattle, mending fences, and caring for the puppies. But the toll of his solitude, the grueling physical labor, and the emotional burden of the winter were beginning to show. His body, once strong and accustomed to the work, now felt like a heavy weight he could hardly bear. His mind, too, began to fray. The silence of the ranch, once a peaceful companion, now felt like an ever-present reminder of his isolation. The puppies, his only source of comfort, were growing up fast, strong, vibrant, full of energy. But Jack, despite his deep connection to them, felt increasingly weak and distant, as if he were losing touch with everything he had fought for. One bitterly cold afternoon, as Jack trudged across the snow-covered field to check the fences, a sharp pain gripped his chest. He stumbled, dropping to his knees, his breath ragged and shallow. His heart, pushed to its limits, finally gave way, and Jack collapsed in the snow, the cold seeping into his bones. The puppies, who had been playing nearby, immediately sensed something was wrong. They barked frantically, circling Jack, but their small bodies couldn't help him in the way they wanted. Luna, who had always been the most intuitive of the group, sensed the gravity of the situation. Without hesitation, she bolted into the house, her tiny legs moving quickly through the snow. She was not a puppy anymore. She was the leader, the protector. Her instincts drove her to act, and she ran straight to the door, her paws frantic against the wood as she scratched to be let in. The other puppies stayed with Jack, huddling around him, their warmth keeping him from succumbing to the cold. They nuzzled him, trying to keep him awake, but it was Luna who saved him. She returned with Jack's closest neighbor, a rancher who had heard her urgent cries. Together, they carried Jack to safety, but it was the bond Jack had formed with the puppies that kept him alive in those terrifying moments. They weren't just dogs, they were his lifeline. As Jack lay unconscious, the wind howling through the barren fields, Luna's instinct was sharper than ever. She had been the smallest of the litter, the one who clung to life in the harshest of conditions. But now she was something more, something greater than just a puppy. She was Jack's savior. With her ears perked and eyes wide, Luna darted across the snow-covered ranch, her small body moving with a purpose that belied her age. The wind cut through her thick fur, but she didn't care. The cold, the snow, the storm, none of it mattered. Jack was in danger, and she would do whatever it took to save him. As she reached the edge of the road, Luna spotted a truck coming into view. Without a second thought, she bolted into the road, positioning herself directly in front of the truck. The driver swerved, slamming on the brakes, the vehicle skidding to a halt. The truck door flew open and a grizzled man in a flannel shirt stepped out, eyes wide with surprise. "What in the hell?" he muttered, looking down at the small dog staring up at him with urgent, pleading eyes. Luna didn't bark, she didn't whine. She simply stood there, her eyes locked on his. It was as if she was telling him that someone needed help. She turned, her body rigid with determination, and sprinted back the way she had come, the man instinctively following. The storm had picked up again, swirling snow in every direction, but Luna didn't falter. She ran faster than ever, her paws digging into the snow, guiding the man through the storm. When they reached the ranch, the stranger's breath caught in his throat as he saw Jack lying motionless in the snow. Luna had led him straight to Jack's side. The man, realizing the gravity of the situation, immediately knelt beside Jack, checking for signs of life. He placed a hand on Jack's chest, feeling a faint pulse. Jack was alive but dangerously weak. The stranger moved quickly, pulling out his phone to call for help, and then wrapping Jack in his coat to shield him from the cold. Luna stood by, watching with wide eyes as the man worked quickly to stabilize Jack. Her body quivered slightly from the cold, but there was no fear in her gaze. She had done it. She had saved him. Jack awoke with a sudden jolt, his chest aching, his body weak but alive. The sterile hospital room was a stark contrast to the rugged, snow-covered ranch he had been on just hours ago. The faint beeping of machines surrounded him as his eyes slowly adjusted to the bright lights. And there, at the foot of his bed, was Luna. She sat still, her fur ruffled but her eyes steady, her gaze fixed on him with an understanding that went beyond words. Luna had been by his side the entire time, watching over him, waiting for him to wake up. Jack let out a soft groan, feeling the weight of his exhaustion. But the moment he saw Luna, his heart swelled with emotion. His hand reached out, and Luna immediately came closer, resting her head gently on his lap. Jack's voice was hoarse as he spoke, barely above a whisper. "You saved me, Luna. You saved my life." His voice cracked with gratitude, the weight of the past year settling over him. "I never thought I'd have anything, anyone, but you and the others, you've given me more than I could ever repay." Luna's tail thumped against the floor in response, her eyes still locked onto his. She had given him a second chance at life, just as she had promised when she was just a tiny, fragile puppy in his arms. Jack's eyes filled with tears as he spoke again, the full weight of his emotions pouring out. "I thought I was just saving you all," he continued, his voice shaky, but full of warmth. "But you've saved me in ways I didn't know I needed. You've given me family. You've given me love." The puppies, Jack realized, had turned his life around. They had brought him warmth, companionship, and a sense of purpose he had never known before. He had been alone for so long, and now, in the darkest moment of his life, they had shown him what true loyalty and love really meant. After weeks of recovery in the hospital, Jack returned to his ranch, his body weaker, but his heart fuller than ever. As he stepped out of the truck, the familiar sights of his property welcomed him. The old barn, standing tall in the distance, the rolling hills covered in snow, and the wind, though fierce, no longer carrying the weight of his loneliness. But it wasn't the land that made his heart soar now. It was the sound of paws in the snow, the happy barking echoing through the crisp air. The moment Jack reached the front porch, his pack of Samoyeds surrounded him, wagging their tails, their fluffy white coats practically glowing in the sunlight. It wasn't just the sight of them that moved Jack, it was the overwhelming sense of belonging that rushed over him. The dogs, his dogs, had become family. Luna, now full-grown and more confident, darted towards him first, nuzzling her face against his leg. She had never left his side throughout his recovery, her loyalty never wavering. And the rest of the pack, the puppies he had once saved, now greeted him as if nothing had changed. But in reality, everything had changed. They weren't just pets, they were the pillars of his new life. The significance of the dogs. The bond Jack shared with his Samoyeds was deeper than anything he could have imagined. In their eyes, he no longer saw the quiet, distant loneliness he had felt for so many years. They loved him not out of obligation, but because they, too, had learned the value of connection. They had been his saviors, offering him not just protection from the storm, but from the storm in his heart. The dogs had pulled him out of isolation, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. They reminded him that family could be made, not just born. Every scratch behind the ear, every wagging tail, every playful bark was a reminder of how far they'd all come together. Luna, in particular, stood out as the heart of it all. She had been the smallest, the most fragile, but also the strongest in spirit. From the moment Jack found her, she had represented everything that was possible, even in the darkest of times. Her resilience, her tenacity, and her bond with him mirrored the transformation of their lives together. Jack saw in her not just the surviving puppy, but a reflection of the journey they'd both endured. A journey that had begun with desperation and ended in the warmth of love, togetherness, and family. Luna had not only survived but thrived, and in her, Jack saw the future. Standing by the fence, Jack watched as the snow continued to fall, but it felt different now. The cold wasn't as biting, the silence wasn't as lonely. He smiled, a quiet, contented expression settling over him as he observed the dogs playing in the snow, their joyful antics filling the air with warmth. In that moment, Jack realized that what he had once believed was impossible, connection, love, family, had come to him in the form of 8 abandoned puppies. They had saved him, not just from physical danger, but from the life of isolation he had lived for so long. As Luna sat beside him, looking up at him with her soulful eyes, Jack couldn't help but reflect on how much everything had changed. His life, once a quiet echo of solitude, was now filled with love, laughter, and companionship. Sometimes, life gives you what you need when you least expect it. These pups, they saved me, and in a way, they gave me everything. And with that, Jack knew his life had come full circle. He had found the family he never thought he would have, and it was more beautiful and fulfilling than he could have ever imagined.